call science fancy.
All right, welcome to Without Equal. It is the official podcast of Sine Pari, and welcome to episode 4. So we are a podcast where we want to talk about leadership, and we want to talk about everything that's going on in the world and life, and try to tie it back into a way that will help you grow as an individual. So today, this is our first long-form podcast. So if you've listened to any of our other shows, we do just kind of a weekly piece focused on a topic with myself, Rob McQueen, my co-host, Steve Cargill, and my other co-host, Chris Perry. And we just talk through kind of that weekly nugget of knowledge that Steve has written up in his fancy blog. But really what we're going to do now is we're going to bring on a couple guests, and we're lucky enough to have 2 guests coming in from our original our first class. And they're going to go ahead and we're just going to have a conversation, a little bit about the class, their experience, who they are, what they do, and then we'll just kind of see where it takes us. So thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to Arron to introduce himself first. Now that we're going to spin it up, we're going to pitch it your way. Arron, introduce yourself. Tell some people, tell our leaders, our listeners about yourself.
Yeah, it makes sense to go age before beauty. I get it. So my name is Arron Canfield. I live here in Northern Virginia, Loudon to be specific. I'm a firefighter for the county. I have the pleasure of being neighbors with Steve. That's how I know him and found out about your guys' program, which I was very excited to partake in.
Yaz, I don't know how you're going to follow that thrilling introduction. So Yaz, it's all you, brother.
All right. So my name is Yaz, I go by Yaz. I'm from Amman, Jordan, currently here in Texas at Texas A&M University doing my MBA with a minor in marketing analytics. For the last 14 years, I've focused my career on marketing, communications, and PR. That's what I'm doing out here right now. So how I got into this program, by the way, because of a friend of ours that knows Rob, and she was unable to attend. So she contacted Rob, put me in touch with Rob, and that's how we connected with Rob.
Yeah, as you had one, you hands down win sharpest dressed on the show today. Like I thought, I busted out with a collared shirt. I mean, it may be short sleeve.
Yeah, you tried hard with the collared shirt this time.
Yeah, Steve is peacocking with the yellow collared shirt, like at the polo. Like he's going very bright today.
Hey, that being said, I think Yaz wins that most places he goes, though, because I'm pretty sure he showed up to the course in a similar outfit.
I think so, actually. Yeah, was that about what you were wearing when you showed up?
Oh,
maybe not the jacket, but it was pretty fancy.
I had to remove a lot of stuff. I got warned on the way. I stopped at the Walmart and removed a lot of stuff in the car before I came to the course.
No, you didn't. You seriously did?
Yes, I did.
Nothing wrong with dressing to impress, man.
I love it. That's amazing. Oh, dude. I had no idea that you made a stop at Walmart on the way to kind of dress it down before you showed up. You absolutely didn't need to.
Did you tell him what you bought at Walmart?
No, because it's recording.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
If you're curious, he bought a hairdryer.
It works.
With hair like that, you have to do it. And Arron, and I don't know if we talked to you guys about this. Like, there's some very, very serious rules that we follow in special operations. And rule number 1 is always look good, no matter what. Like, always look good. Rule number 2 is if everything goes to shit, refer to rule number 1, and you're okay to move through.
Well, also too, like if you're worried, about, he shows that he knows a little bit about unconventional warfare with being ready for transition. He's prepared to make it to the next step wherever he's going with that hair dryer, making himself look just right for that next event.
Look, was it a solar powered hair dryer? Just curious, because you were going to an austere environment, right?
When I called Ashley on the way, she said, "Oh no, there's electricity." I said, "You're kidding, right?" And she's like, "No, they have electricity." I was like, because I didn't know what I was getting myself into signing up for this. So I thought I was going to be in the middle of the wilderness, no water, no electricity. So when she said, "Yes, no, we have that." And I was like, I need to stop at the Walmart, get things out of my bag, put things in my bag, go buy a blow dryer. So
got to have priorities.
Contingencies.
I love the fact that we're finding these things out months later. This is a conversation that is just.
But we weren't supposed to find these things out.
That's the best part, though. And No, so again, Yaz, Arron, I mean, we've said this 100 times. Thank you so much for coming out to that initial experience with us and helping us kind of vet and work through our methodologies. And now we've got you as our guinea pigs on this first kind of long conversation, which may divulge into just style tips from Yaz, because even with the pocket square, I mean, it's phenomenal. I'm a fan.
Well, honestly, and I think it's a great point, and it's a perfect example of, each of us were so busy running that initial, that was the initial course. So each of us were so busy, there's a lot we didn't see, much less I'm sure that all the participants that came through, you guys have so many stories about stuff that went on that we did not see. And I mean, it's a perfect example as it relates to this leadership stuff. There's always stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So I'd really like to, I look forward to hearing some of that stuff, because I was busy, neck deep in the woods trying to put stuff together. I know Rob and Steve were going around with you guys, and there's just a bunch of stuff that happened that we would love to know about, because we just can't see it all. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and that touches on another aspect of in leadership that is incredibly important, and that's reflection. Being able to look back on an event, look back on, say, a period of time, maybe the last week or what have you, and being able to digest it. And being able to digest not only involves what you already know, but what you maybe need to learn based off of engagement with others on what they experience versus what you experienced. So, it's key to be able to understand what took place and how can you move forward from there after having truly digested it.
Yeah. So let's take that and let's turn it back over. Arron, since Yaz shared a pretty good story, like kind of give us something that happened during your time down with us in Texas that is just stuck with you, either funny, terrible, good, lesson, whatever it is. Like, give us an anecdote from your time down there with us in Texas.
Man, it's a kind of hard to pinpoint a certain thing. I still, I know it's been a couple months since the course, but I still think about it a lot, the different scenarios, how it could, apply to me in my job, in my field. And honestly, it's kind of hard to narrow down one specific point during the class that really stuck with me, because the whole thing is stuck with me. Every aspect of it, from meeting everybody, seeing how everybody reacted to the environment, and kind of learning from everybody how to overcome the obstacles. It's really helped me in my field, especially as we get newer guys that come out in the field and start working our stations, how I can help them overcome some of the scarier or more intense situations that we run into. I know
Arron,
it's kind of a roundabout answer, but it's really hard for me to pinpoint a certain thing. I enjoyed every aspect of that course. I like getting lost in the wilderness and, not having any cell phone signal is great. My wife hates it, but I love it. Yeah, it's really hard to pinpoint a certain point that really stuck out. I think I've taken a piece away from every scenario, every topic that we covered. I learned a lot from the cadre themselves, just with their feedback that they gave us.
So, Arron, I'm kind of curious. And when you look at, how long have you been a firefighter, man?
Coming up on 5 years.
So 5 years what did you do before being a firefighter?
I was more in the business research and development phase.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was actually a professional dancer for about 10 years.
Wait, what? All right,
Yeah.
so I had an entire line of questioning. I was going to go down here.
No, go down this, because I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I'm going to take over now. So one of the cool things about this is, honestly, one of the best things that I got out of this program is the I don't know how to say in English, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the sisterhood that everyone got from each other, and the networking opportunities. I think a lot of us are still in touch. So Arron and I obviously stayed in touch. I was in DC just last month, and so I would go to visit, and I get to stay at his house, and we're talking. And while I was talking to Aaron's wife, he was out of the house or he was doing something. And she's like, oh, yeah, Aaron's a professional dancer. And I was like, sure he is. And she was like, because in my mind, I built up Aaron, the firefighter, that has nothing to do with it. She's like, oh, yeah, he did contemporary. He does ballet. He does. I was like, what? Who are we talking about? So please go question now that.
I'm jealous, man. Like I have 2 left feet. Like I barely struggled through country swing in college, and it's because my girlfriend at the time wanted to go do that, and it was a painful experience. So wait a minute. So are we talking like Dancing with the Stars style, like contemporary tango dancing? Like fill us in, man.
What is it? Yeah.
How do you?
So I was really hard pressed not to say anything. I really didn't want to let it out, and have it do anything to affect the environment, because I know that that's such an interesting aspect about Aaron, and I love that about him, because that it's just this other facet that just makes him that much more interesting, really. So and engaging, because you want to learn more about this, right?
It's
yeah,
funny.
Absolutely. Well, it's out there now. So.
I knew that you were trying to get that out of me when we were down there. When you were asking the interesting points to everybody. But yeah, it's gotta ease into that.
Right.
So I don't know what the age is, but there is an age, and I'm going to say probably early 20s, like mid 20s, when dancing stops being something that people laugh at and transitions to something that people are like, oh shit. Because I spent a ton of time in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and I would go out with my friends that are down there and with people that have become kind of, my second families. And I would go out to the clubs with them, and I have no rhythm. I am as ginger white guy as you can possibly get to. And I would go out with these guys and just normal dudes that I've been surfing with, that I've been working with really hard, that had never seen it. All of a sudden, like a salsa beat would hit, and I'd be like, brother, how are you moving your hips like that? And then the women would all be dancing, and they just dance. And so there is a window. Like, I'm not kidding when I'm jealous that you've got the dancing skills, because there is a window that transitions when, if you can dance, it no longer becomes like, oh, you're in ballet. Why is a guy in ballet? Or, oh, you're a dancer. Like, that disappears at like 25. And every other person in the room is looking, being like, God damn, I wish I could dance like that guy. So I'm a little jealous, but how did I just want to drill down on the dancing piece and see how you became like, we're going to spend 2 more minutes, and I promise we won't go back.
We got time. So yeah.
Yeah, we do. How did you become a dancer, man? Like, tell me, and like, what's the professional dancer piece? Like, how did this thing go?
So my whole life, I've actually been a martial artist. I've practiced martial arts since I was able to walk. And I actually got into dance as a rehab from an injury. And so I stuck with it for a little bit, young dude who wouldn't want to be in a room full of girls with tights on, So I started doing it, and my instructor at the time was like, yeah, keep with it. It'll increase your flexibility, your strength, your balance, everything. I was like, all right, great. And then one thing led to another, and somebody offered me a job, and I was like, wait, I can get paid to do this? All right, sure. And so I moved out of my family's house at age of 16. I started dancing professionally. Spent some time in Richmond with Richmond Ballet. That's actually where I met my wife. Granted, we didn't date for years after that, but that's where I met her. And then I got offered another job, which actually was phenomenal, because I was able to incorporate more of the martial arts background and the dance as well. Because it was very, very contemporary, modern, sort of like Cirque du Soleil, if you're familiar with it. And with that company, I actually got to travel the world. I spent a lot of time in Italy, where I was able to, kind of learn the language. And I got to go to a lot of different countries and experience a lot of different cultures. It was phenomenal. And I think that's something that people tend to look over. They just think as a guy dancing as what? Like, what guy dances, But in the reality of it, like I said, I met my wife dancing. I was able to travel the world, not pay a dime traveling the world, and experience a lot of things that a lot of people may not get to experience, starting at a young age when I did.
Yeah, so it sounds like you found something that was unique. You found a niche early on, and it opened the world to you.
Yeah, it did. It did. And there was a lot of experiences that kind of helped me build my leadership skills. It's funny. You guys experience leadership in a much different way, right? But you're also familiar with how different parts of the world are. And there was at one point early on in my career as a dancer, we were actually down in Rio, where at the time there was a lot of civil unrest, and we ended up getting stuck in the theater. And I was managing the group that we were with. So it was a group of 10 dancers. And we were stuck in this theater, surrounded by riots, guns, bombs going off. I mean, it was nuts. And of course, all my friends, who I worked with, who I was managing, they were all freaking out, and the martial artist protector side of me came out, and I was like, all right, well, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get out of here because it's not safe for us to be here. And did I really know what I was doing? Probably not. But you know what? They needed someone to kind of guide them in the right direction. So I was able to build their confidence in me by just kind of showing them like, nope, this is what we're going to do. I know what we're going to do. And let's move forward. And luckily, we did get out of there. I was able to coordinate with some of the theater staff on best way to get out of downtown. And, in talking with them, they were able to coordinate someone to pick us up on the outskirts of town. And we all got out. It was easy. Looking back now, could I have done things differently? Absolutely. But at the time, I think I was 21 and didn't know any better.
No, that's awesome, man. You were assertive, and you were able to, just take advantage of the volatility of the moment, and you just took charge, and people saw that in you and they followed you. So that's a powerful thing. And, it's incredible you were able to do that at 21 and be able to make something of the situation, and it's just something that it's one of those innate qualities to be able to take charge in a situation and to create order from chaos, and you were able to do that. And so applaud you on that.
I think it's an interesting piece, and Arron, that's a rad story, man. For me, it's interesting because my travel and everything came so much later in life. Like at 21, I think my international experience had been getting in a bar fight in, Penticton. No, where was it? Castlegar, British Columbia, right? Like, I mean, that was the experience. Like that was my international experience at that point. So it's rad. And it's so interesting because I don't like having worked with you, having you come out to the course, having talked to you and gotten to know you a little bit. There's just such a huge gap that I had no idea about that paints a really cool picture about like, how you are and where you've come from. That's just rad. But I do want to ask a question because I think this is an interesting point, and to try to, tie a little bit of leadership into it is you said that you would have done things different than kind of where you are now. And I know for a fact, myself and the rest of the cadre and in the course and everyone I know that kind of considers themselves a leader, every single one of us, I think most of my lessons come from, at the time I did what I thought was right, but really what could I have done differently? And where I realized that I've grown as I look back, I'm like, God, I would have done that completely different than how I did it at the time. So I'm really curious, your path from professional dancer to firefighter, and growing and, your own individual pursuit to become a better leader. Like looking back on that moment, like, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, man. I mean, personally, I think if we had waited it out a little bit longer, we might have been better, just kind of hunker down where we were, shelter in place and let whatever was going on outside kind of run its course. The hard part is we didn't know how long it was going to be. And I think if I could have gone back and done something a little bit differently, I still would have tried to get my guys out, So my group consisted of 5 females and 5 males. Not that the males and females makes a big difference, but in a situation where there is rioting and unrest, in my experience now, females are an easy target, right? Which is the sad part. So me putting them out there, getting them, trying to get them through this crowd, really put them at risk. And hindsight, I probably could have gotten some of the theater staff to help me, escort them out, as opposed to getting my group of guys. There was only 5 of them, none with really any, we'll call it, protective experience. They've either grown up in academies or easy lifestyles. They're unaware of what's going on. But it's hard. I think looking back now, I should have gotten more help before just getting my people out and putting them at a bigger risk than they were inside. My mind was so set on getting them out of the danger that I didn't think of maybe sheltering in place would have been better for us.
Dude, I mean,
we're waiting for authorities to come, and escort us out that way. I just didn't know at the time. So
no, and I get,
but at the same time, I mean, making a decision is sometimes more important. Actually taking charge of a situation than just letting a situation transpire. I mean, we can always go back and, work it over in our head, what could be done or what should have been done, but you'll never live that experience exactly over again. Even if it were to happen again, the circumstances might be different or you're different. But the fact that you took charge in a situation, right? Nobody else was, and you consciously made decisions versus waiting on the situation to dictate the terms, and you made the best of it. So it sounds like it worked out all right.
Yeah, and you can never tell the future. So it's always good to, just like Chris said, take charge and make something of the situation, because you don't know what's going to happen. So you might as well make it as good as you can make it at that time.
No, I think that's a really good point. And hindsight's always 20/20. Like, and you can go back and second guess yourself over and over and over again. And I know, like, for the decisions I've made that have caused harm or been poor decisions, I think those are the things that eat me up inside as a leader. Is like, God, I wish I would have done this different. But in the end, like you guys both said, Chris and Steve, is you can only do the best that you can do at that time. And it's one of those things that's tough. Aaron, we went way more than 2.5 minutes on the dance piece, dude, because that turned into just a phenomenal story. Like, it's amazing. And I want to throw this back towards Yaz and really get in, because you gave a pretty good little intro to yourself, but Yaz, you've had some really rad experience prior to you getting to Texas. So I really want to hear some more stories from you and maybe kind of some experience in your past that's kind of built you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think my life, I could make it into several movies, kind of like Lord of the Rings, with different sequels and prequels and everything. But I grew up, I had the privilege of, even though I am Jordanian, I grew up overseas as well. I lived in Saudi Arabia for a while, and my dad was in the oil and gas industry. So we traveled quite a few. And with every different country that we lived in or things that we traveled in, there was always something interesting that happened. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Kingdom, where the terrorists came into different compounds and they killed different people and whatever. That was the compound that we grew up in. That was our houses. That was our neighbors. So it's our story. So when we see that, it was kind of interesting, because we lived that. We literally were stuck on a rooftop for about 4 or 5 hours when the terrorists came into our compounds. We couldn't leave until the Saudi military, and as well supported by the U.S. military, they came and secured the compound. We were able to evacuate and go back home to Jordan. We were there during the Gulf War as well as a little kid, but I still remember them giving us like gas masks and going into the swimming pool and like learning how to breathe underwater with oxygen tanks as well. So when we hosted U.S. military, and I was like, why are these strangers living in our house? But that was part of the, in first grade, second grade, that's what you're thinking about. But yeah, I mean, I think life is filled with experiences, and even the things that what I would take as mundane or that you would take as mundane, there might be great things like us going camping for the first time. We're going for our first hike, which I've been doing that since I moved here to Texas. When you look at things through a different perspective, what seems ordinary to you or whatever, it's mind-blowing to someone else. When people come and visit me in Jordan, they see Wadi Rum in a desert, and they're like, this is so beautiful. I'm like, it's sand. And then I go here to the States and I see someone's green lawn right in front of their house. I'm like, this is so pretty. And they're like, it's a lawn. I was like, can I mow your lawn? And they're like, yeah, go ahead right there. And I get excited about the little things like that. But just touching on what Arron's story really quickly and about leadership and going back, one thing that I always want, like even now when I'm writing dissertation and I have a bunch of papers in front of me and we're looking at strategic business models and strategic decisions, we can always prepare, but you don't know for certain what's going to happen. And where we are today, as in looking back, I think that is a sign of a true leadership, not necessarily the outcome of the event, because you're always trying to look back and see, did I do the right thing? How could I have done something differently? Because you learn from your mistakes or you learn from the past. You can't forget the past. And that's one way that you can prepare for the future. I mean, looking at these SEC filings now for all these companies that I'm looking at, they can't predict what's going to happen in 2022, and reading like everything pre-pandemic and how everyone's like, yeah, 2019 is going to be an amazing year. We're going to shoot for 27% profitability and we're going to do all of that. And then February, we got hit with COVID, and then their stocks went tumbling and everything went tumbling and their businesses tumbled. No one predicted that. But then now in 2021, when we're doing the SEC filings going into 2022, how could we have operated differently in 2019, 2022? What could we have done better? Were we prepared? Where did we have contingency plans? But I think that's what makes a good leader. You can still fail and be a good leader. In my opinion, you can still fail and be a good leader as long as you learn from your failures and you move forward with that.
Now, I like how you brought up, learning from your failures there, Yaz, because, Arron mentioned that, he was second guessing, and, second guessing kind of has a negative connotation. But how I would like to view that is in a different perspective. It's the reflection. And because you are reflecting and you're really analyzing it, what you can do is you can now plan contingencies for the future where, that may not be exactly what happens, but you have a base from which to deviate, and you've got an idea of what you can do, and you're not coming up with things on the fly, and you're not reinventing the wheel. So you're a bit more prepared because you have reflected, because you've had experience. And it's and there is definitely value in failure, because that's where you really reflect. Because if you've got like I've mentioned before in the previous podcast, I think it was, if you've just got a success, you're just going to look to the next success. You're not really going to reflect on it as much as you would if you have that failure.
Steve, that's a really good point. Yaz, I want to kind of caveat off what Steve said and bring it back to you. Is you really brought up, what has been the center of all of our universe for the last 2 years, which is this ongoing pandemic, and the impact on businesses and personal lives has been out of control. I think there's a really unique conversation piece to this, and I'm gonna go a little bit political just to kind of see where this conversation goes, because I think it's a really good point. As leaders, like you said, Yaz and Steve, failure is okay, right? Like, mission success is always the goal. You're always going to work through it, but you are going to fail, and you're going to have to learn from that and grow and move forward. What I see and what I see is the challenge in pretty much every society on the planet as we move past this pandemic and into whatever this next phase of life is really we're going to have leaders that are going to look back and they're going to try to grow and be like, okay, this is what we did wrong. This is how we move forward. But I worry in a lot of these cases, we don't really have leaders. We have politicians. And so looking back and recognizing failure is not acceptable as a politician, because you said, oh, I screwed up and it cost this many people their lives, or it cost this much money, or it cost this much in GDP. And so now we have this really, like, I think to me is an interesting touch point, and also a struggle that we're going to have is we have a lot of politicians that aren't necessarily leaders, because a leader would be like, yeah, you're right. I did the best decision with the best information I could at the time, but on the backside of this, I was wrong. I got 70% of it right, and that 30% that I missed caused a lot of damage. But we're going to grow, we're going to move forward. I would predict, and if I had to, maybe this should be an odd at Vegas and the over and under, how many politicians or leaders that we have are actually going to take that approach to it and be like, God, I screwed up. I didn't have the right data. My data was wrong. My decision making was wrong. I couldn't predict what was happening. I did the best I could, but it was this. Instead, what we're going to have is, if I had to predict, I think we're going to have a lot of witch hunts and a lot of pointing the finger and blame, which to me, like, it loses the accountability as a leader, which you should have. And I think a big part of this is, as a leader and having junior leaders underneath me, you have to create that environment where it's okay to screw up. It's okay to fail, as long as you fail the right way, right? Like, it's not a moral choice. It's not, the things that you're not stepping outside of the bounds where I lose trust in you. You just made a mistake, or you didn't see it the right way, or you did the best you could and it just wasn't perfect, and we'll grow from it and move on into this aspect of, now we're getting into placing blame. Now we're getting into moving forward. And so I kind of wanted to throw that back and put it out to the group, because it's a little bit political, but I think from a leadership perspective, I think, Yaz, you brought up, to me, a really good talking point to see how we move this forward. So I'm going to throw it back out to the group and see it goes from there.
Yeah, I think you're right with, like, if you have a zero defect environment, you're setting yourself up for failure anyway, because there's a growth in learning from those mistakes. If you work to try to not have mistakes, then you're not going to push the boundaries of what the possibility of, the realm of the possible is, and you're never going to grow. You're never going to, reach your full potential. And with that, you're failing inherently. And then also, too, on the point of politicians not really being truthful about, making mistakes, or there having been mistakes, I think that they should take a lesson from social media, honestly, in that people who are social media magnates, they humanize themselves, and that draws people's attention, that draws their interest. And so, if you can be more humanizing, and if you can make a connection with people, then I think that they'll be more successful.
It's funny, Rob. I know you talked about politicians, but I think you see a lot in every aspect of leadership. There's a lot of leaders that, if they go down the wrong path, they're very easy to pass the buck to the next person. Obviously, yeah, we see it a lot with politicians, but we do see it in every day, every aspect of leadership, and it's unfortunate. I'm lucky to have some really good leadership at my station, and I've learned a lot from them. One of the things that one of my drivers, technicians, he told me when I was coming up and learning the different driving skills and learning how to drive the rigs, he was like, whatever you do, always have an answer for all of your actions. But with that said, always leave room for improvement and positive feedback. And that struck with me, and you can apply that to leadership. Have a plan, and if it goes south, explain why your reasoning was to go about that way, but have the ability to accept the feedback and acknowledge where you went wrong, as opposed to saying, oh, well, this is what I was going to do, and it went wrong because of this person. I think what happens a lot of times is that the leaders get caught up in being that leader, and they say, oh, well, yeah, it was supposed to go like this, but because of this, or because of this person doing something, they weren't listening to me. That's how it went wrong.
Yeah, and having that justification, what that really lends itself to is accountability. You're having accountability of self, and you're making sure that you're documenting it so that you're justified in what you do, whether it went right or whether it went wrong. And that's a big thing not only for self, but for others, making sure that those around you, you're holding them accountable, they're holding you accountable. And then also, too, you don't cast blame. You don't look to shift responsibility when, if you can simply justify it, then most times people can work with you on that with that context.
I think and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think one key term that we're all kind of going about, which is a huge trend that we see into 2022 from a PR perspective about what consumers want from brands and what brands need to give to consumers. And this also ties in with what Rob was talking about earlier about the COVID and politicians, is transparency. I think that's a key attribute that we need to have as a leader. So I think no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, this administration or the past administration, I think everyone had mistakes that were done. Now, where they could have done differently is from day one with this pandemic. If we were to go on TV and to say, look, we are going to be as transparent with the public as possible. This is the first time that we're dealing with something like this. We do not have the answers. We do not know if this vaccine will work 100%. I mean, like, even when we drink coffee nowadays, it always has an asterisk. This is 99% coffee, because they can't say it's 100% coffee because it's got other ingredients. So I think we really need to focus. If they were transparent with us from the beginning, then you build that trust with your target audience. Same thing, whether you're a leader and your team. If you tell your team, you know, if your team comes up to you and says, hey, we hear like there's going to be people being fired, are we like, I'm hearing the exact same thing as you, I will keep you in the loop. You don't have to overshare as a manager or as a leader, but you can protect your team and you can share. And it's called being diplomatic with the politicians. It's not necessarily lying, but you're feeding them information, being as transparent as possible while controlling the situation. Because if they were to come out on day one and say, this is a pandemic, we don't have a solution, we don't have a cure, everyone's going to die, we're going to lose millions of lives, it's going to scare everyone, and it's probably going to go. So the way that they handled it, say, we got this, we'll come up with a vaccine, was great. But also just like all this misinformation that we get about this vaccine, you know, again, just be transparent with all of that. Brands, one of the biggest things that you will see on brands nowadays is they're expecting more from these corporations to be honest, truthful, and transparent. What's in these products? What's in the services? Where is my money going to? Where are you sourcing your products? Where are you getting all that kind of stuff? Because even things that, again, my English is going to suck here, but even things that are not tangible, like a brand, it's turned into this with social media and now moving into the metaverse. It's come like this breathing, living organism. And I think that is where we need to come back to here. You need to be transparent from day one on everything, no matter what your position is, no matter what you're doing, because that will build that trust. And once you have trust, you can work with people that you can trust. You can influence people that you trust. And those are all good characteristics. Part of being transparent is that accountability. If I make a mistake, I need to own up to it and say, you know, I made a mistake. In the financial sector, same thing. We have hedge funds with plan A, plan B, plan C. You know, when you give me your money and I'm supposed to go invest it in the stock market, I can't guarantee you 15% increase year on year on your stocks. But that's why we have a basket of where we invest in. These stocks might go up, these stocks might go down. So you're planning for a best case scenario and a worst case scenario, and you give these outcomes. So you give these outcomes and you work with it. But if you trust me, if I was transparent with you on every step of the way, you're more likely to trust me with your money and keep your money with me as your hedge fund or that. But please don't give me your money. I'm really bad at the stock market.
Yes.
So yeah, that
I want to jump in on this one, Steve. Sorry. Yaz, I think a really good thing there you hit on there is trust. And this is where I kind of give, you know, politicians and brands a little bit of a pass, because when you think about this, as a good leader, you create an environment that allows your subordinates or, you know, or your employees, however you want to look at it, you allow them the room to make mistakes, right? You allow that accountability to be there, like, hey, you made a mistake, but hey, we're gonna remedy it, we're gonna move forward. In the current environment and social media and everything else with this kind of like, I need this now, I need it fast, I want to know what's happening, I want everything, this massive amount of information, but also this massive amount of the kind of desire to get your voice out there. I don't know that we create the environment for politicians or for leaders or for brands to make a mistake and then actually be able to recover from it, right? I think you can take a look at this from a cancel culture perspective. You can look at it from, the old adage, which I think is important, the voting with your checkbook. But I think it really comes down to is in the entire environment that we're in, like a good leader creates an environment that has flexibility, that has room to make mistakes. But do we actually allow those mistakes as a population for the brands, the large corporations, and for our politicians? Because how can we expect them to have the transparency that you're saying when we don't create the environment? And this could go back to the polarization where the opposing factor is looking for anything to drive home. So it's like you make a mistake, you're getting hammered. And instead of pushing that transparency forward and owning that mistake, you're now in damage control mode and it becomes a PR war. And the rest of us get stuck in this environment where it does at times feel like a zero-sum game and a zero mistake environment, right? And to me, I think it's really interesting, but I also think it's more of a societal problem. I'm lumping it into the US and our society, but I really do think it's global. When you look at this, where somebody makes a mistake, it's almost like, hey, bring him in forward. We're dropping the guillotine. Who's next? Instead of allowing people to grow and move forward.
So
I'm going to share my 2 cents worth just because, and I have to cut my time short. I'm sorry, Aaron, Steve, Jim, Chris, but I literally have to go in a little bit. But let me just share what about a few things that you touched there. I agree with you that it's very cutthroat. Now, however, these changes that we're talking about, these problems or these issues that we're addressing, these are macro issues that we will not see a change 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, not even a year. It's going to take a generation. So I think if we see accountability from our politicians, or if people start demanding that accountability and that transparency and that trust, and yes, it's going to suck for one political party or another. They might be excommunicated for their political party here in the US if they say, we as the Republicans or we as the Democrats, we did a problem, because then the Democrats will turn against their own party or the Republicans will turn against their own party. So no one's going to do that. But as a good individual human being, now 10 years down the line, we can look at it and say, wow, that person was what brought change to where we are today. You look at everyone from Mahatma Gandhi to Nelson Mandela to Martin Luther King. They were literally, when they were living at that time in their beginning, especially, even Nelson Mandela until way later. Even till today, some people in South Africa still have mixed emotions about Nelson Mandela. They have mixed emotions about these leaders that decided to speak truth, to preach, to go against the norm, that to address issues that they did not want to be addressed. So they were ahead of their time. And here we are now, 40, 60 years down the line, we're still using them as examples, because rare and few are these men and women that come into and say, I did wrong, and I'm not afraid to be ostracized. Is that the word in English? Yes. Or like excommunicated by these people. So that's from a political front. From a company front, it works 2 different ways. I've seen companies where, and I worked in PR and management in crisis. So we had crisis controls, and we actually literally prepared or depending on your industry, we would prepare documents. Let's say if you had a biochemical hazard spill, this is our major response. These are the reporters that we talked to first. This is how we would address it. So we'd had contingency plan A, B, and C. And I think that's part of the leader as well, for you to forecast problem that you might see that would arise in what you do and prepare for it. Again, like Steve touched earlier, you're not going to have a playbook where it's 100%, this is what's going to happen, or this is the exact same situation, but at least you have some kind of playbook to refer to, and then go from there. There have been companies where they were able to, one of the companies right now that's developing this vaccine had a huge, I'm not going to say their name in case this podcast becomes very famous and then they're going to sue me for $1 million, which I don't have. But one of these companies had a huge scare with baby products and that it was causing cancer, and it was recalled globally. Yet their products are still on every shelf in Walmart, in CVS, in Walgreens. They're being sold, and no one is talking about it. But if you Google their name and research and look about all this negative stuff that they had, we gave them a second chance. We turned a blind eye because, yes, they did bad in XYZ and it caused X many people to die, perhaps. However, they did so much good. So we give that leeway to these companies or whatever, that we as individuals, we're trying to take advantage of that. I mean, like, well, they didn't affect me. I don't have any babies, so it didn't affect me, and I love their products, so I'm good. I don't care. But then we see other companies that have smaller issues, but because of how it played out on social media or whatnot, that get ostracized, and we expect a lot more for them to do. Look at BP and what happened with the Gulf spill, your Gulf oil spill. Globally, their shares went down. Even in my country, and we don't even have oil for a Middle Eastern country in Jordan, it was like, oh, did you hear what BP did and how bad it's for the environment, how much it killed? Because it's how you spin a story as well. And I think that is also key thing as leadership. I would always touch on, you always want to be in control of the narrative. Try as much as possible, no matter what. If you did a mistake, when you are honest and you are truthful and you take accountability and you want to talk about the word I used, I lost on transparency. When you're transparent, you can control that narrative. You can put that spin. You can alleviate how much the consequences are going to be based on how much you did planning and how much you put in control. So for me, these are all good characteristics of a leader, and that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you for listening to me.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought up transparency, man. That reminds me of a story I'll tell real quick. That in the Army, it's funny because you can't count on being anywhere, even if you've got orders in hand, until your feet are on the ground. And that's exactly what happened when we were deploying, my company and I, during 2019, because the headquarters where we were going, they weren't sure where they want us to be arrayed exactly. Did they want us to be in El Salvador? They weren't sure, and that changed a couple of times. Did they want us to be in Panama? They didn't know, and so that changed a couple of times too. And a couple of different countries shifted around. And what that caused was our teams to plan iteratively. Well, now we're planning to go here. Well, now we're planning to go there. And it changed 3 or 4 times the array of where our forces were going to go, and then they had to plan again. And the predictability was terrible, but I was able to be transparent with my team leaders and with my company to say that, hey, the headquarters doesn't know where they want us exactly, but know that we're going, and you're going to have a good time because you're going to do what you like in terms of engaging with foreign partners, training with those partners, going to a foreign place and experiencing the culture, being there, and just being able to enjoy that environment that is the SF environment, engaging with foreign forces. And also too, we're in the National Guard, and so one of the complaints that we always have in the National Guard is we never have enough time to do this or to do that. And so they were getting iterative planning practice in, and I highlighted that for them. I was like, hey, when do you get opportunities to plan like this, to bring your team together, to delegate, to plan, to create contingencies, to think of all these things? They're like, well, never. I was like, you're getting it now, aren't you? And it was kind of a light bulb that went off for all these leaders, and they were able to have better understanding for the situation, have greater appreciation for the opportunity that it was being provided, though it was not the intent. And so just being transparent can help you gain a better perspective and get everybody on board, like
Definitely.
What was the case there.
Definitely. Hey, Yaz, I know we got to jump off,
just to
man.
be transparent, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for letting me be a part of this podcast. I really do appreciate it. I had a great time. If you guys get a chance, seriously, sign up to the Sine Pari stuff and let's do this. I mean, I've learned a lot. I know you guys will too, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can't wait for our next talk.
Yes, cheers, brother. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Guys. Take care.
Bye, yes, thanks.
See ya.
All right, so back to Arron and the dancing.
Hey, one thing real quickly I was going to say though about the transparency and some of what we've been talking about. I mean, that especially as a leader, that does start to dictate the climate of your organization too, right? I mean, a leader that obfuscates the facts or is less than transparent, subordinates are going to see that. And as we talk about like zero defect mentality and all the pitfalls that go along with that, I mean, that's going to breed in the subordinates. One, zero tolerance from their subordinates for anything. And also they're going to try to hide stuff, right? We already discussed that. They're going to either try to blame somebody else or try to hide the fact of why it happens. And you get in this you develop a culture of this finger pointing, blame game, etc. And I think part of that is also what we're seeing society-wide, as you guys were talking about too, everybody pointing the finger at everybody, and everybody's adopted a mentality now where they like to see people fail, or they like to be able to point the finger at somebody and say that they did something wrong, because it kind of takes any eyes off of them for a while, right? And so it's just become a cultural kind of perspective where people enjoy watching other people fail. And to some extent, and this cancel culture piece is the, pinnacle of that, where they're actually, it seems to be, some people enjoy burning other people to the ground, even over something that's relatively small or innocuous. Not always, but you see that, and it's something that definitely needs to be reversed writ large. I mean, you see it everywhere we go. And so I don't know where it's going to end up, but all we can do is our piece, right? Trying to be more accepting, more tolerant, more open, more transparent, because also it kind of stifles creativity. If people know that there's zero defect, or they're not allowed to fail, nobody's going to take those risks. And historically, you look at where some of our greatest achievements or accomplishments as an organization, as individuals, come from, and it's from people taking chances. So the lack of the ability to do that, or people being scared to take those chances, think of the impact it'll have on our society, on our businesses, private sector. I mean, everything. Military, we definitely saw that years ago in the military. So it's just something that people need to be aware of, and hopefully as leaders, we take an example, try to make more of an example of encouraging people to take risks and take chances.
Yeah, Chris, and with that too, it's funny, there's some irony in that when you see others revel in burning others down, in pointing blame and seeing others fail, when they can keep the focus on those other people, then they're able to revel in the lack of a need to be accountable themselves when the attention is elsewhere. We see that quite a bit.
Sure. I have a thing that I've long said. People in general, like society, humanity, our mindset, I think we need an antagonist. Most people need some form of antagonist. They need something to validate themselves against, or something to succeed against. And we live in such a relatively sheltered and safe society. We lack any natural predators for the most part nowadays, that people search for someone to be the antagonist to their story. And that's why you see such vitriol sometimes when they find something to unleash that on. And so it's, you see it, I mean, everywhere from the comment section on videos and YouTube, you scroll long enough, you'll find some people calling each other idiots over whatever the thing might be. But it manifests itself. And again, leaders even more so manifest that in their organizations by the mentality that they adopt.
I want to touch on a couple of things that you guys have brought up, and some of the stuff that Yaz talked about. Like Chris was just saying, like nowadays, everybody is going to find something wrong with those that are succeeding, or those that are really good leaders. When those good leaders do make a mistake, they're going to harp on it, and they're going to draw that out and make that the big, aspect of what they did. And I think that where we see that a lot is, Rob, like you were talking about, politicians getting in these spotlights, and maybe not having the opportunity to address what they did wrong. We allow social media, gurus or whatever you want to call them, to draw focus to the wrong that they did, as opposed to what they were trying to do on maybe on a bigger scale. And that's where I have a huge problem with social media, is that you're not giving them the opportunity to accept that they were wrong and figure out a way to move forward from it. They're in more of a reactive mode as opposed to a proactive mode, because our society as a whole likes to bring everybody else down to make themselves feel better. And you see that a lot with leadership, or I mean, at least I do in my field. When you've
those who are in charge,
right? I mean, anybody in charge. It's somebody trying to improve themselves, in any way, or better themselves as a leader. there's always going to be the people that will naysay that and try to bring you down. And it's kind of funny, and maybe this is kind of mean of me to say, but in that aspect, I'm not really afraid to burn those bridges. Like if I'm trying to better myself as a leader or as a person, and this person is trying to bring me down, I will 100% burn that bridge, because guess what? I know how to swim, and I'm going to keep going forward. I'm going to try to make myself a better leader, and I'm going to figure out the best way to do it. But I think as a society as a whole, we jump on the social media train too easy. I have a huge issue with social media nowadays. I feel like that's keeping us from moving forward and fixing our actual issues,
So Aaron, I want to jump in because I think that's a really good point. I've had conversations with good friends of mine that are pretty high in social media. They have a lot of followers and they use it very effectively. And I hate social media personally, like I hate it, but here I am like driving a company forward using social media. So if you look at social media, and you can kind of align this with any type of conversation, right? Like, if you look at gun control, the argument is like guns kill people, but is it the guns or the people? And social media, well, social media is this horrible thing, but is it social media or the people? And so it can be a debate and a discussion, but I think what's really important and what you're hitting on is you have that ability and that confidence to step back and understand that, like, hey, I'll burn this bridge to the ground, or understanding that like what these people are saying doesn't really matter. When I first, I didn't even have a social media account until I started working with Waves for Water, and they're like, hey, build a little bit of account, like we're going to tag you, you need to use it. And like, I think it was probably, I maybe had like 150 followers, and I was in Puerto Rico, and this whole thing blew up where people were just upset over how we managed one situation, which is a story for another time. And I got super pissed off. It became this whole thing. And my boss, John Rose at the time, was like, look, dude, I don't know how to explain this. He's like, there's always going to be somebody that hates you for what you're accomplishing, what you're doing, whatever it is. And social media just gives every single person a voice to like leverage into that. So understand, you're going to have people that are going to just bash you, and you just have to let it go. Like you said, it's not even burning that bridge, right? Like it's just ignoring it. Like the best thing about social media is I can completely ignore what everybody else says and just move on with my day. I think Joe Rogan said, post, walk away. Like doesn't even look at what happens after he posts it, right? He just puts it out there and walks away. And so I do think there's this like middle ground that I'm slowly figuring out with social media, and even with like leadership as a whole in like the modern day, because to some people, their existence on social media is more important than their existence in real life, which is something that as leaders going forward, you have to pay attention to, you have to understand, and you have to be able to mentor and coach and then manage your environment, because also a lot of companies live and breathe by social media. So we're in this weird place, and Yaz mentioned the metaverse, which I know very little about, but we're in this weird place where like real life and what we consider fake, but has massive implications in real life are kind of colliding. And for leaders in the future and everything going on, how the fuck do we manage this?
Yeah, because I mean, you can't placate everybody, and you have to lead by your own values and what you believe in and do what you believe is right. But if that comes in direct contradiction with somebody, how is it resolved when you throw in the social media aspect of it, or a bunch of people? They always say, they did this or they did that or they canceled these people. Well, who is they? How do we actually define those nebulous quantities? Who are we talking about exactly? So it makes it difficult, right? Because you have to do what you believe in, your values, and your virtue system or your value system is right. But when it comes to leadership, you're exactly right, Rob. I mean, everybody has their own perceptions, and their personal life and their professional life can be intertwined, and especially on social media. So it makes it that much more complicated.
Yeah, and also going back to the point that Aaron brought up there is that if you got somebody who is degrading others, they're really just the person in charge. They're not really a leader, because a leader is a mentor, somebody who helps bring others up, either to their level or just to improve the quality of those around them, they are a mentor. And Arron, what you've highlighted is that you're demonstrating the existence of the leadership spectrum, where people all along the spectrum from followership to leadership can interject and insert leadership skills and qualities and attributes so that you can improve that atmosphere, improve the dynamic that exists there. And it doesn't need to be solely that person who is officially designated as in charge to be the one to really assert leadership quality in an environment.
I feel like this got deep. Like, I feel like we hit like a philosophical piece on modern day leadership and the shit we've all gone through. Damn, I don't know.
It's absolutely, and it's a complicated situation, right? Of how we do it going forward, because you can't lead by catering to the whims of the masses necessarily. I mean, you have to go with what you believe is right. And it's definitely going to be a difficult landscape to negotiate in the future. And so I think the more adversity you expose yourself to, I mean, the more situations you familiarize yourself with, I suppose will help, because there's just stuff coming up. Leadership challenges that I never would have dreamed of 10 or 20 years ago, just as society goes forward.
Well, Chris, I feel like not enough people do this type of thing. Like, Rob, I know you said we're reaching like a different level on the leadership, and it's interesting because I love having these kinds of conversations because I learn a lot from them. I take away a lot of them, or a lot of aspects, and I feel like people don't do that enough anymore. It's hard to sit down and have a conversation and voice your own opinions or your own philosophies on different aspects of life or leadership, whatever it may be. But it's hard to have that conversation with somebody who maybe not see the same eye to eye. Politics, leadership, day-to-day things. Everybody is easily offended nowadays, and nobody really just sits down and talks and figures things out. Like that's what I love about these kinds of conversations, is because we can all sit down and talk about leadership. And personally, I'm going to take something away from each and every one of you, because you probably each have a different view on different aspects of leadership, right? You're all special forces, so I'm sure it's all very similar, but the reality of it is you guys are also your own person, and maybe sees situations differently. And that's what I love about it, is because I can take something away from each and every one of you, and apply it to my own life.
Arron, I want to jump in because I think that's a really cool part, and I think there's a difference between somebody being in a position of leadership and someone being a leader, right? And what my personal piece, why I love this project so much, is in working with you, I get to learn so much as well. And you're in that constant state of learning and growing and kind of pulling everything together and building off everybody else's experience, kind of taking it on as your own, which is the best, right? Like, the best way to learn to be a leader is not to make the mistakes yourself like you're going to, but it's to learn from other people's mistakes and kind of grow forward. And in the current environment and everything moving forward, and just kind of the depth of this conversation, which has been, I think, really enjoyable, is really being able to dive forward, learn from other people's experiences, build it into your own repertoire. That the phrase that I hate probably more than anything, but it's stupid accurate, put it in your tool bag. Like, hey, this is another thing. Like, now I know that if I'm ever a dancer in Rio, in the middle of civil unrest, I can Arron's example and know exactly where to go. And just
yeah, but I think also the more diversity that you can expose yourself to, the better, right? And be tolerant of other people's opinions, experiences, and everything else. So when you start placing judgment on a lot of it, so the more of a dialogue you can have with different people and listen to the experiences, because what was the old adage? It was always the three things you don't talk about at dinner was politics, religion, I don't remember what the other one, what that did is it created a society where we are unable to talk about those things without arguing about it, right? The whole point of it was you don't talk about them because you're going to get into an argument and ruin dinner. But now we can't talk about a lot of stuff without getting into arguments because we don't know how to engage in civil discourse about differing opinions or differing experiences, and we judge so much. So, I mean, leadership is a perfect example. Listening. You can listen to, I mean, just from every time we talk to people, especially in this vein, but just tonight, listening to you guys' stories. I mean, I've learned stuff that I'll take away from it. It shapes your perspective, and hopefully down the road, helps you be a better leader when you encounter different situations, or even individually as your own personal thought processes.
Yeah, not being able to really talk about ideas and being able to be tolerant of other people's ideas because you actually listen to them. I think we've fallen into a trap as a society, following the footsteps of the media, in that with everyone having access to social media, everybody wants to be first in doing something, first in saying something, and appearing to be correct because you're the first one. Well, you're not always going to be right. You might be first, but maybe you should stop and reflect and make sure that you've got a better product, a better idea, before you decide to try to engage in the discourse. And then maybe you'll have something that's worth discussing and that isn't as volatile or disruptive. And it would be value added if leaders take on that quality of not necessarily being first, but being more correct and having that situational patience. I would say a leader in business might be Apple. And so the Apple iPhone is always steps behind where Samsung is, for instance, in the development of, the characteristics of a phone. Maybe the Apple phone doesn't have as great megapixels or whatever, but the quality of the product speaks for itself, and they take their time with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I know myself. I'm that is one I definitely am working on is having that ability to make that decision to move forward, or to not necessarily be the first one to do it, or the first one to have that idea, but to at least voice that opinion. That's an issue that I've had for years, probably stemming from my childhood, which I'm not going to get into because that's a whole other story. But that's something that I know and I've seen as a what's the word I'm looking for? Key benefit, I guess, to a leader is having that ability to do that and just stepping up and saying or voicing your opinion or your idea without the second guessing yourself of, well, I don't know if this is the right thing to say or this is the right thing to do. I definitely fall victim to that a lot, and that's something that I know I need to work on. And it's funny because I was definitely made more aware of it during your course in some of the scenarios. It was being able to say, hey, I think this is something that we should do, or hey guys, like, what do you think about this? That definitely brought that out of me, and since then, that's something I've been working on, and it's actually been awesome.
Aaron,
like I said, Rob, there's so many things from that course that I've taken away. It's hard to just name one. I keep thinking of different aspects of that course that's helped me out a lot.
Hey, Aaron, this actually did lead me to a spot. I was going to ask you a question, but I didn't want to put you on the spot, but you kind of touched on it here. Because it's something that we have kind of been talking about. I mean, in the course, each of you, like the obstacles you run through, everybody gets to be in charge of something and everybody else is a teammate. Were there any where when the team leader would get issued the mission or the objective or give you guys a plan that you didn't necessarily agree with the way they wanted to accomplish it? Or, how did that work out for you guys? Did you ever see anywhere leader had to sell you on the way he wanted to accomplish an objective, or were you guys pretty like-minded when it came to it?
I think we were all like-minded to, trust what that person said and give what they were saying a shot, as opposed to just voicing our opinion, be like, I just don't think that's gonna work. Let's try this. At least the group that I was with, for the majority of the time, whoever who was in that leadership spot, we listened to what they said and what their plan of approach was, and we would all give it a shot, because maybe it was the right thing to do. And if it wasn't, then okay, let's go back and talk about it. I don't think there's ever a point where any of us were very opposed to what that leadership role was telling us. At least for me personally, I was very open to whatever they were telling us. I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot, because in that environment, it's a learning environment for us, right? If it's right, great. If it's wrong, let's learn from it and try to figure out how to overcome where we went wrong. So I don't think there was ever a time where I was very opposed to what they were saying.
Yeah, it's funny because I always go back to one of my teams. I had one of my guys on my team. He was just classic for anytime I gave out any kind of guidance. For sure, he was going to have some kind of feedback, smart mouth or otherwise or whatever. The thing was, it was always fairly well thought out. There's very few people writ large, I think, that can tear something apart better than a group of SF guys. Like, they'll look for weaknesses or holes or shit talk just in general. But so I knew that there would always be some, there'd be some pushback or bitching and moaning if it was something, depending on the difficulty or whatever. But I knew specifically one guy on my team would always have some kind of, like, you could count on it every time. But one thing was, it always made me think, because it was always well thought out, critiques or criticism. And so I was usually pretty receptive to it, because one, I would know that I had to have my plan tight going in before briefing these guys, because they would look for any weaknesses in it. And it was also frequently presented me with other ideas of how to execute something. But again, the leader, when you're in charge, that only works so much. Sometimes there's a time to welcome input and feedback and adjust your plan. And then there's other time, when it's tactically or time sensitive, I'm just like, that's great. I understand. Shut the fuck up and let's execute this right now, because we don't have time to, like, later on we can debate the positives and negatives or the merits of this, but right now we need to get this done. So we're executing it. But at the same time, I could pretty much count on every time we were going to execute that there would be some kind of critique or, hey, did you think about this? So I kind of had to learn. I learned to deal with that, but I appreciated it for what it was. And then again, there's a time and place for it, right?
Yeah. Speaking of learning, Arron, a couple of times now, as you've contributed, what you highlighted is what we are trying to convey with our course in transfer learning. So what you've done and what you experienced is you were able to be in a leadership position, experience it, know you're in an environment where you're encouraged to experiment and try new things, et cetera, and you're able to iteratively improve. And then you're able to transfer that, take that experience, and then put it on the job where you're able to then implement and iteratively improve there. And so that's one of the key functions of what we're trying to convey with our experience, is giving you the tools to then transfer to your day job or whatever it is, so that you can begin to iteratively improve. So glad to see that could work out.
Absolutely, man. Like, it's been great. And by no means am I in a leadership role in my current job. I'm just a firefighter, right? But what the great thing is that I can go to these courses, or I can learn different techniques and still be able to be a leader to those who are just coming into the field. I don't need to be an officer in the department. I can be the firefighter and help the guys coming in, and be a good leader to them. I don't have to hold the rank to be a leader, and that's really what I've taken away from it. And obviously, do I have aspirations of getting in a leadership role eventually? Sure, but currently, it's how can I help lead the young bucks, or whatever you want to call them, the rookies that come in? How can I help my leadership in showing them the right way to do things or how to handle situations. I can still be a leader at my level.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And you highlight another dynamic about leadership is that leadership just doesn't manifest itself instantaneously when you're anointed as the person in charge. It's good to have that experience leading up to that point, developing it over time, refining it over time, because what you find is that so often people just show up on the job as a leader unprepared because they've never thought about it, they've never experienced it, and then suddenly they're left flailing and trying to learn on the job, and that's not the right answer. So you're doing the right thing right now in developing that experience, practicing those skills, those attributes, and developing your leadership style before you actually formally get into a leadership position, so that you can actually do your element, your team, whoever it is, an actual service and not a disservice in being prepared ahead of time for that formal role.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing is I'm sure you guys have seen it in your fields as well. Like there's always one guy that just promotes through the ranks because he wants to be the top dog, or
looks good on paper.
It's money that's driving it. And that's my biggest thing is that's not the one I want to be. I want to actually be that good leader when I'm ready to be that. And I take away from I take learning points from the good leaders and the bad leaders, because we have a lot of people in our department, and I'll be honest, not all of them are excellent officers, but I can still learn from them, right? They still got time in the job, and they've run some scenarios where things have gone good or bad, and I can still learn from them. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Being a leader is being able to not just look at those that have succeeded, but maybe those are the ones that are struggling as well, and learn something like what has kept them where they are. Why are they struggling? What can we do so that I am not in that position moving forward?
No, that's awesome. I appreciate the perspective, and you're in one of those positions too that where leadership is of the utmost necessity because lives are at stake every time you go to a fire call, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just me; it's my guys or the people in the building or whatever the call may be. Be it a medical call or a house fire. My decisions, my actions, my direction can affect a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been an amazing conversation, and I think for our first kind of around the robin with guests in this, like I've taken a ton away from this. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing, man. Seriously, like this has been awesome. I wish Yaz was here to say thank you. But I kind of feel like we've hit a good point where it's just, the conversations kind of come full circle and kind of push this thing through. So unless there's anything else, and I'm totally off base, which is, a 50-50 shot with me. I could be completely off base on this whole thing. Unless there's something else, like I kind of like to kind of just push it around for closeout. And I think this was a good shot at our first kind of freeform conversation. We really talked about everything. So I'm going to push out. Aaron, we're going to give you the last word because you're the last guest standing. But let's push it out. Chris, Steve, you guys have anything you want to add to this to kind of start to close this thing out?
Yeah, I can just real quick. I mean, this has been awesome. I'm not by any means used to doing any of this kind of podcasting and I appreciate all the listeners, everybody who's, giving us their time listening to this. We learn something every single time that we do this. Come away with something new and look forward to meeting more people to have these kind of discussions. And this has been great. Really so awesome that Yaz and Arron were able to give us a little bit of their time, share some of their experiences. And it's awesome that this Sine Pari family is just continuing to grow and sharing each other's experiences, and look forward to doing more of this. So thanks to everybody. Really appreciate it. Steve.
So following up on that, as a leader, you learn to not be satisfied with the status quo, and you always want to see constant improvement. So Rob, with your issue with dancing, man, I think that there's still hope because I know you got some creaky bones. And as a rehab, I know you can go dancing, man. I know that you've got it in you to improve and fix that with some rehab on the dance floor. And I really think that you need to take that, run with it.
I may overplay the inability to dance just a tad because I will dance your face under the table, you in your bright yellow shirt. Like, I can't wait to get out to Virginia and let's go out dancing. It's in, and we're gonna bring Arron along to make us all look.
I don't need to worry about dancing so much because I'm just fancy.
I'll say next time that we're down at Fancy's watering hole in Huntsville, we can have a little dance off between you two.
So, hey, that's the end of episode 4. Thank you so much for joining us today. Subscribe, share this, help us kind of push this forward. Leadership is something and kind of the intangibles around leadership that is so important in kind of us moving forward as a society and as individuals. And hopefully the little conversations we have with some pretty damn amazing people will help grow that in yourself, and you can have a good time and join us. So like Chris said, we're going to keep growing the Sine Pari family and keeping on doing what we're doing. So thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe, and we will talk to you next week. Cheers from Sine Pari.
Cheers.